Hello, and welcome to this month's webcast on printers and how they work on the iSeries. My name is Ryan Ingram, and I'll be your presenter today. On behalf of DPS, I'd like to thank you all for taking time out to join us. Hopefully you'll all get something out of this that you can use. For today, what we're going to discuss is, three different areas. First, we're going to talk about printers that are not typically connected to your server. These are printers that might be connected to your PC using a USB cable, or maybe they're just office printers or personal printers at home that while they're connected to the network, they're not set up for use on the iSeries, which means you can't see them, you can't direct output directly to those printers from the iSeries. The next thing we're going to talk about is network attached printers. We're going to discuss those printers that are attached to the iSeries. And show you some ways to get around those, to do some basic troubleshooting maybe, at least at the very minimum, know how to start them, stop them, and we'll briefly discuss how to set them up, although we're not going to go through the full process because it's rather involved. If you are interested in that, I'll be happy to talk to you one-on-one about that, and we can get you up to speed on that. And finally, we're going to talk about how to direct printed output in the iSeries to get that to the printer of your choice. So let's start out by talking about these personal printers, these PC attached printers. Whenever I'm talking about a personal or PC attached printer, I'm talking about any printer that you can get to from your PC or your Mac or whatever you're using, but not directly from the iSeries. So this might be a USB connected printer, or one that's an older printer that's connected with serial port, or perhaps an office printer, a network attached printer that is not available on the iSeries, but you can see it whenever you go to print a Word document or Excel or something like that. So the most obvious way to start out this discussion is to talk about the easiest method, and that is if you're using Axon. If you're using Axon, then you have several tools available to you. You can print reports directly to any printer that's attached to your PC. I'm using a familiar dialog box, similar to something that you would see in Word or Excel. You can convert a document from the iSeries to a PDF and save it to your desktop or any folder. You can also convert to a text file. Axon, of course, also allows you to use any of the iSeries printers. So let's look briefly about that. If you look at the Axon Link report viewer and you open up any document, you'll see three buttons. The first button looks like a printer, the second one looks like a PDF, and the third button looks like a little text document. And that's exactly what they do. The PDF and the text document are pretty self-explanatory. If you click those, it's going to prompt you and ask you where you want to save the document. The printer opens up a dialog box that looks just like it does whenever you're trying to print a Word document or anything else. And the printers that are available are the printers that are attached to your PC. Now, these might include printers that are shared with the iSeries and might not, but anything that you can see from your PC you're going to be able to use from that. So I won't belabor this too much, but if you're using Axon, it's pretty easy to utilize whatever printer you want. Now, if you don't have Axon, or if you want to automate the process a little bit, so you don't want to have to deal with selecting a document and choosing a printer in order to print it, then there are other options, and this is the first fun option we're going to discuss. Just so that you know, this option does require that you have a second piece of software installed rather than Axon. If you don't have Axon, likely you already have some kind of a 5250 emulator on your system, whether that is IBM's Client Access or possibly a third-party 5250 emulator like Mochasoft or TN5250, one of those. They all offer, at least I won't say all, but the ones that I've used offer similar functionality in letting you designate a user session as a printer session. So that's what we're going to do here. We're going to take, and I'm going to use Client Access since that's what I have installed. So in order to do this, what you're going to do is you're going to start a new session, new Client Access session. And whenever the configuration window comes up, you will need to make sure that you configure it like normal in the sense that you need to make sure your system name, your server IP address or your system name is there. If you're using SSL, you might have to click on the Properties button and enable SSL. If this is confusing to you, please let us know. We'll be more than happy to help you out, help walk you through this process. But there's not much. I'm going to leave my example here fairly simple and fairly vanilla. Even though there's more setup you could do on this, it's not hard to get a printer set up and working. So first thing you need to do is you need to click on Specify Workstation ID and type in the name of your printer. This is what your printer is going to be named on the 400. So if you want to make sure that this is the name of your printer that you want to use. I usually leave all the checkboxes over here blank. I do that because if you click on any of those, it's going to add characters to the end of it. So it might say Ryan PRTA or Ryan PRT1, and I don't want that. So I'm going to leave those blank. The only other thing that I have to click here in order to get this to work is I have to click on Printer, the Printer radio button, in type of emulation. That's what tells it, hey, I'm not going to be doing a 5250 session where I'm going to be running through menu options and running programs. Instead, I want this to handle printer output. And then after that, I'm going to press OK. What this will do is this will open up a client access session that looks a little bit different than the sessions that you're used to seeing. It'll show as a print job, and it'll have information that'll tell you that it's ready to go and that it's online. Or it will tell you that there's a problem with the printer. It'll allow you to start and stop this printer. Now, at this point in time, the printer has been created on the iSeries server. You can see it on the iSeries server, but you have to know that in order to print documents to this, you need to select a printer, and you also need to make sure that this session stays open. It's kind of like if you have one of the 5250 sessions open, you have to keep it open in order to use it. So this has to stay open. You can minimize it. You can set it to where it starts automatically every time you fire up your PC. All those are options. But this has to be open and running on your computer in order for you to direct output to whatever printer this is directed to. So if you can go up to the top left-hand corner of this screen, and there's a file menu. And if you click that, you can go into printer setup and choose whichever printer you want to use for this session. And that's the printer that'll be used whenever you direct output to this printer. So finally, if you go over to the iSeries side, we'll go ahead and take a look, and sure enough, down here you will see Ryan PRT, that printer we just set up, is available for me to use. And if you don't know how to get to the Work with All Writers list like I'm at right now, don't worry about it. I'm going to show you that command here in a little bit. Right now, it's just important for you to know that I was able to create a client access or Mochasoft session and turn it into a printer section, and now that printer shows up on the iSeries, and I can direct my printer output to that, and it'll print on my desk or whatever printer I have that directed to. Okay, so there you go. Now you can take a document and print it to a printer that was formerly not connected to your server. So you've learned a new trick today, hopefully. Let's go ahead and extend that just a little bit. I showed you how Axon is able to create a PDF simply by clicking on the button whenever you have a document open in Axon Link's report viewer. Well, let's say that you either don't have Axon, or you want to automate the process to where you don't have to look at the document first. You would like to be able to send a document to a printer and have that create a PDF automatically. Well, that is possible. And I'm talking and not going through my little animation here. So instead of all the paper, we can get rid of it and print directly to PDF. The way that I recommend that you do this is by using some kind of a PDF converter, and there's several different ones free online. There's also some paid versions that might be a little more robust. Of course, the biggest paid version that you can get is Adobe Acrobat Professional. So, but the QtPDF is a free PDF printer, and it's worked great for me in the past. I've used it off and on, and I've helped some of my clients set it up whenever they've come to me and needed a PDF printing solution. And whenever you install this, it'll show up in your list of printers, and you can select it. And then once again, you would go through the same steps that we did earlier. You would create your client access or Mochasoft printer session, and you would direct it to the PDF writer. And your documents would then go through that PDF writer and be stored wherever it is that you have that output directed. So hopefully that you've learned a couple of tricks there. But we've spent enough time on personal printers. That's how I handle those. That's how I address personal PC attached printers. Let's move on to server attached printers. Now, in this section of the presentation, what we're going to discuss is a printer that is set up, a network attached printer that's set up on the iSeries so that it communicates with the iSeries and accepts output. And usually these printers are higher end printers. They don't have to be. They can be any kind of a network attached printer. But usually they're higher output production office printers, that warehouse printers for your picks, that kind of a thing. And what we're going to talk about is how to look at those, how to turn them on, turn them off, some real basic troubleshooting, and finally we're going to discuss how they're created, although I'm going to only give you a taste of that. And the reason for that is it's something that you should discuss with your IT staff before you, and with your DPS project leaders and support staff before you start adding printers to the server to make sure that they're configured and set up the right way. More than likely, they will require some tweaking once you have them set up, because you have a lot more power and flexibility with a printer on whenever it's connected and configured on the server. With that, you obtain a level of complexity that goes with that flexibility. And finally, we're going to talk about how to direct some printer output to these printers. But that'll be our third section. Okay, so what makes up an iSeries attached printer or a server attached printer? There are three parts. Whenever you set up a printer on the iSeries, you wind up with a print writer, a device description, and an Outq. Now, they all work in harmony and they're all required. The print writer is what the server looks at and says, okay, this is a printer. I can send output to this. I can process. This device is supposed to process printed output. This is what you turn on and off if you need to turn the printer on or turn the printer off. This is where, if there are problems, this is where the messages will display to show that something's wrong with the printer. If there's a message that displays for form type, for changing a form type, or that kind of a scenario, all that gets directed to the print writer. The device description is everything that's connected to the iSeries server has a device description. And this contains like the IP address and configuration information for the printer. And finally, the Outq is where you put your documents. Whenever something winds up in the Outq, whether it's a PIC or an invoice or an AR statement or a report, if that Outq is connected to a printer, and if the document is ready to release, then it'll go through and it'll send it to the print writer, and it will wind up printing on your printer. Let's talk about a couple of useful commands for navigating around these different pieces of the printer. The first command that we'll talk about is WorkWriter, WRKWTR. What this does is it shows a list of every printer that is on your server, whether it's started or whether it's ended. Anything that's available to start or end can be found using the WorkWriter command. The command next in line, the WorkWriter with an asterisk all, looks very similar. It returns a list of all printers that are started and active. So these are, or that might have problems if you're troubleshooting. But these are printers that are actually started, that are ready to receive some kind of output. And finally, there's a work config status, WRKCFGSTS, and that big long string right there that will let you see the status of the print device. And this is where this is a piece of the puzzle that lets you vary on or vary off a device on the iSeries. So don't worry too much about that. We'll get that. We'll get to that whenever we talk about starting and stopping these printers. So let's look at the output that you get from WorkWriter. If you type WorkWriter, you'll wind up getting a list of printers. And please note the statuses, that second column that's over, how a couple of them say end, some of them say STR, and I think those are the only statuses we have there. And we don't have any problems with our printers, but it shows you everything that's available. Obviously, I couldn't print to HP8DN1 because it's in an end status, but I could print to HP8DN2 because it started and ready to receive printer output. If I use the WorkWriter *all command, you'll see that all of the printers are in a start status. If you look over to the far right, there's a status column, and one of those has a message weight, MSGW. That means that this printer needs our attention. Hey, it could be that it just needs a form type. Maybe you're printing AP checks on this printer, and you want to make sure you have the AP checks forms loaded or taken out, depending on whether you're at the start or the end of this process. Or maybe this printer had a network issue, or maybe it's just turned off, and the iSeries server is saying, hey, we can't communicate with this anymore. What's going on? But in short, everything that's on this list is active and ready to receive some kind of an input. Doesn't need to be started. These are all started printers. Finally, we've got this work config status, which lets us look at the device and specifically whether or not this device is varied on or varied off. And you'll see that I've got, I went ahead and did this on that Ryan print printer that we set up earlier, and it's got a status of vary on pending. And this might look a little bit different depending on whether you're looking at one that's natively set up on the server or one that was created, one of those virtual devices that is created by a client access session like we did earlier. But you'll use this command if you need to vary on or off this device. And finally, even though I didn't have WRKOUTQ in my list earlier, it is important because WRKOUTQ is where you see all of the documents that are in a printer's OutQ. Now normally, if you release something to a printer and it prints automatically and you're not saving a copy, you won't see anything in here. But if you have documents that are held, or if you save copies, or if for whatever reason the printer isn't working or the OutQ's held, you'll see documents in this OutQ. And you can do that by typing in WRKOUTQ and the name of the printer, or in this case the name of the OutQ. For our purposes, for the most part, your printer names and your OutQ names are likely going to be the same, but they don't have to be. So don't worry about that. Don't concern yourself with it. Just if you have that scenario going on, your printers and your OutQs do not have to share the same name, but they usually do. Okay, now that we've looked at the different pieces that make up these print devices on the iSeries, let's talk about how to stop them and start them. Pretty basic commands, but important nonetheless. In order to stop a printer, you need to end the writer and then vary off the device. They do two different things. When you end the writer, you tell the server not to accept any kind of printer output. Don't process any printer output. But you don't sever the connection between your physical printer and the server. That's actually that's controlled by that device description we were talking about, the print device. So when you end the writer, you stop the processing of documents. When you vary off the device, you sever the connection. Now I've shown you two commands that you could type in a command line. You could type in end writer with your printer name, and that would end the writer portion of the printer. And then that long vary config command underneath the vary off device will sever the connection between the device and your physical printer. Or there's a more user-friendly method, which would be to use the WorkWriter command and find your printer and put a 4 next to it. That will end the writer portion. And then you could do a work device description or that vary config command that we did earlier. And you can select your device and put a 2 next to it, which you'll see is the option to vary it off. the sequence of events there is kind of important. You won't be able to vary off a print device that actually has an active writer. So if you try that, it's going to come back and say the device is in use. And it's actually a fairly common troubleshooting issue that I get, where where the printer had the actual physical printer had a networking problem, or the cable was loose, or something happened between the printer and the server, and the connection was lost for a period of time. And the iSeries is still trying to connect back to that printer, even though, and the printer might actually be on and functioning again, but for whatever reason you can't get documents to print to it. So what you really want to do is you want to turn off, stop the printer, and start it again, but you can't do it. And I'll show you that. I'm going to show you how to do that after I show you how to start the printer. Let's take it a step at a time. Let's go ahead and look at starting the printer. So in order to start the printer, you have to do the opposite. You need to vary the device on first. You have to have a communication established between the printer, physical printer, and the server before you can start the writer. If you try to do it in reverse sequence, once again, you won't get very far. The writer will act like it's going to start, but then it'll immediately end. So sequence of events is important. And once again, I've got the easy mode here, which is honestly what I use more so than the commands that you type onto the command line. I'm a visual person, so I'll type in the work writer and the work config status in order to look at them and vary it on and off. The main reason I like to do that is because then I can see the status. I can see whether the printer is really in an in status and that the device description is really varied off. I like to see that. That's why I do that. Okay, so now you know how to start and stop a printer. Most printing issues, in my experience, can be resolved by starting and restarting the printer. It's not always as easy as it sounds, because sometimes you will try to stop the printer and it won't stop. And it's usually on the writer end of things. So that's where this next illustration comes in. Whenever you are trying to stop the writer, which you would have done the work writer and put the 2 next to your, I'm sorry, the 4 next to your writer. If that doesn't work, you can go ahead and put that 4 next to the printer that you want to end and prompt it by pressing F4, and that'll bring up this window right here. And what it will say is, oh, sorry about that, going too far. It will say asterisk controlled in that field, and that means that it will end it whenever it is ready to end it. And that doesn't happen in a rapidly in my experience. I don't know exactly when that occurs, but I do know that in a situation where you've had the network drop, which is the most common printer support issue I get, asterisk controlled doesn't work. So I changed that to when to end the writer, asterisk immediate. That will kill it right here and now. I think that there's probably a downside into that. If it was processing a document, you'd probably lose that document. So don't just automatically kill it using this every time. But if you need to kill the printer, if you need to end the writer, and it won't end, you can do this asterisk immediate, and it will force it to end. And at that point in time, you'll be able to vary off the device, vary it back on, start the printer back up, and it'll give you a new message. Either it'll start and the documents will run as expected, or you'll more than likely get a more informative message saying, oh, there's a communication problem. Is your printer turned on? Is there paper? Stuff like that. So, well, we've talked enough about these basic commands for navigating around and starting and stopping the printers and a little troubleshooting. Let's move on to talking about what happens whenever you need to pick out a new printer or you need to set up a new printer. And we'll start by picking out a new printer. I commonly get asked what printer to buy. What printers are going to work well on the server, and that's a hard question to answer. What I normally do is I have whoever's calling give me the printers that they're interested in. I might provide a recommendation, but more often than not, I have them pick out a printer or multiple printers and send me the make and model number, and I will go out to IBM's website and take a look to see if IBM has support for these printers. So I've included a link, but I know I never remember the link. I have it bookmarked, I think, but I normally just Google IBM Supported Printers. It's the first link that pops up in Google. And you have to drill down and pick out your manufacturer, and from there pick out the model of printer. And you can see if you see a lot of no's and not applicable and stuff like that for the printer, then more than likely you're not in very good shape. But if it's on IBM's list, they've at least taken a look and tested it. If you look at that and it's Greek to you, feel free to give me or one of my coworkers at DPS a call, and we'll be happy to interpret the IBM's list. So, well, assuming that you have picked out your printer and you want to add it to the iSeries, we need to cover what you do next. First of all, if it's your first time adding a printer to the iSeries, or anytime you're adding a printer to the iSeries and you'd like a little help or assistance, please give us a call. We're here for you. We'll be happy to walk you through the process, or we'll be happy to do it for you. No harm there. I'll be happy to do it. The command that you use in order to create a new printer on the iSeries is the CRT-DEV-PRT. And I think you can just press enter, but I think I always press F4. Get used to that anytime I want a prompt window. You need information. You're going to need the name of the printer. That's the name that you're going to assign the printer, whether it's PRT01 or Mike's printer or Ryan's printer or whatever it is. You're going to need the IP address of the printer. And we normally recommend that IP address be set up as masked as a host table entry, so it's got an English name, but you can plug the IP address directly into this also. You're going to need the make and the model of the printer. You're going to need to know some of the specs of the printer. And finally, you're going to need to know whether or not the printer requires what is called a workstation customization object, which is a way of saying IBM has done some kind of like it's not really a driver, but it's very similar. It's a way of modifying the output so that it looks and feels proper whenever it goes from the iSeries. It gets transformed and comes out on your printer looking the way that you would expect. Sometimes things might be positioned up and to the left a little too much, or down and to the right a little too much, or it might run off the edge of the page. Workstation customization objects are a way to manage that without having to make program changes or changing reports or anything like that. Whenever you do this create device print command, 3 objects are created. And I know you saw this before, but the create device print will create a print writer, a device description, and the Outq. Now, I did gloss over quite a bit. In fact, I didn't even show an image of the create device print process. Mainly because there's a lot to it. We could spend a half hour going through that. I don't see any harm in typing that command in, pressing F4, and looking through the different options that are there. But it's a good idea to go through that the first time guided. If you do decide to tackle this on your own, and you've let DPS know you're going to do it, and you have the blessing of your IT staff, then I do recommend that you start by basing your first printer on parameters set up in a similar printer. Like if you have an HP printer and you want to add a second HP printer and it's the same kind of printer, you could do a display device description and look at the device description and basically copy paste what you need where you need it. Of course, not the name itself of the printer, but pretty much, and the IP address, but pretty much everything else you'd be able to plug in, and your printer would be up and running. Like I said, this process can be a little bit complex, and perhaps I'll do a second webcast and I'll put it on YouTube on how to do this, given that your IT staff, owners, and everyone give their blessing. In the meantime, if you would like to know more about setting up a printer on your iSeries, or you would like our assistance, just give me a call or call DPS. One of us will be happy to step you through the process, or like I said earlier, we'll be happy to do it for you. We'll get you set up. Okay, moving on. This next section on directing spooled output is going to be fairly brief. This is the one section where I'm actually going to delve into our software and not talk just about the hardware, the server. The example I'm going to use is extend, but the document print direction for functions are very, very similar to what we have in our Zap product also. So if you're using either of those products, you can take this information and use it. So the majority of our documents, at least the transaction documents, are controlled by our print director. And what the print director does is it takes a form type and allows you to assign rules. In this case, you'll see that the very first field there says XINV. That means invoice. If this were a live session, you could put your cursor there, press F4, and you'd see all the different possible form types that we can assign rules to, and they would have English level terms associated with them. But XINV for our case right now means invoice. And you'll see that that first line has a rule for John C, user John C. And so with John C is sending his output to Outq HP8D1OVL. Now if you look down one record, you'll see that Judy S is sending hers to HP8D2OVL. So there right away you have two different Outqs for two different people. This is a way for us to set up individual rules for different scenarios. User level being the most finite rule that you could have. We could have also set up a warehouse rule so that if you had a warehouse in Washington and one in Sacramento, your Washington warehouse could print its documents in Washington, and Sacramento's can print theirs in Sacramento. And then from there, you can also drill down to the user level a bit more. And you see there's lots of options here. You can control the number of copies, whether or not the document is held, or whether it automatically prints, whether you save a copy. There's even some overlay offset stuff that you shouldn't concern yourself with. But a good chunk of our documents in Extend are controlled by the print director. Not all of them, mainly the transaction documents and posting journals and stuff like that are controlled by the print director. If you need to direct, here's a list. I'm sorry. Here's a list of all of the documents, or most of the documents, that are controlled by the print director. There are more than that. If, however, you need to control and direct reports, such as something like maybe a backorder report or a sales analysis report, and they don't have entries in the print director, you can do that at the menu level. You'd go to the user menu option file maintenance program and choose the menu, whether it's sales analysis or order entry or purchasing or accounts receivable, and drill into that, and you'll find a field that's called the default output queue. And that default output queue is the printer where any document that's printed from that menu set will go if it doesn't have any other rules to follow. Of course, the print director is going to get followed first. If there's a rule at an individual menu item level setup, like the backorder report only prints to John's printer in his office, if it's set up there, then that would happen. But other than that, it'll fall through and catch this Outq right here. And so all of our documents from order processing that aren't controlled by the print director and don't have any other rules in the way will print out on the PRT01 printer. And with that, that is how you direct documents on the 400, at least in a nutshell. If you have any questions about that or you want further explanation, just give us a call. We'll be happy to walk through it with you. Now, this is concluding our webcast, but I wouldn't feel like I've done my job completely if I didn't mention that what we've discussed is how to create paper documents and how to route paper documents. We discussed briefly how to do PDFs, but if you want to truly think about a system where you're doing document management, to where you've got things indexed and archived, to where you can search and look up, whether you want to go paperless or even if you want to keep a paper copy and you want to have electronic versions that are easily searched through and for organizational purposes, automated processes. We have a business partner named RJS that is fantastic at getting that done. Highly recommend their product. our software is integrated with theirs. A lot of our processes are automated if you have RJS installed. So if you'd like more information about that, please contact your sales rep or your project leader or any of us here at DPS, and we'll be happy to get you more information on that. There will likely be a webcast in the future showing off and discussing those options. So I want to thank you all for attending. It was a great webcast. Hopefully you got something out of it. We're going to have a question and answer session. As always, for those of you who have joined us in the past, it takes us a second to switch from my headset and my laptop and this display that I have going on to our conference setup in our conference room. So if you'll bear with us for just a moment, we'll get right back with you. And thank you all. I'll talk to you again soon.